Foreign Policy Talk Series, an initiative of the CIS and UIC Panorama on the Caucasus. Yeah, it's our second webinar in the last few weeks on the Caucasus, South Caucasus. This time we'll be having regional perspectives as our speakers are from Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And our moderator is Turkish. So how much more regional do you want? I just like to say this has been a successful series to date. I think it's our sixth installment, and it's picking up. And I always come out of these discussions much more enriched in terms of ideas and information than at the start of these discussions. Before I leave you, and I leave Mustafa Aydin to take the floor, and I should say also the speakers are all friends. Zaur is a more recent friend. Eka at Keshelashvili, I've met her a long time ago. She was in Greece. She had basically just been appointed foreign minister quite some time ago, and we met and talked briefly. Richard Giragosyan, I've known him quite a few years, and he's been instrumental also in the Armenian-Turkish dialogue. And Mustafa Aydin is my partner in crime in the series for many, many years. If you like this event, which I'm sure you like, just know that our next event is next week, next Wednesday on the 25th of November, where we will be talking about the US presidential elections, the implications for Turkey and its neighbors, with another great group of speakers, with Ian Lesser from the German Marshall Fund, Natalie Toci, who is well known in EU circles, the director of EIA in Rome, and Dorothee Schmidt, who is the Turkey expert at IFRI, France's big think tank, and Mustafa Aydin. And I will be moderating the discussion. So without further ado, Mustafa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. As Dimitri has already indicated, this event is organized by Center for International and European Studies of Kadir Has University and Panorama platform of International Relations Council of Turkey. And we have been doing this number of times, and this is the second one on the Caucasus. No doubt recent developments in the Caucasus deserves even a closer look, more than twice, maybe a couple of more, we'll try. Tonight we have really great team. When anywhere you talk about Caucasus, definitely you have these three people there, and I'm listening there always. And as Dimitri said, all of the participants tonight are great friends, longtime friends of mine as well. And we have walk, talk, write together more than, I don't know, 20 years now, I think so. Tonight we have, let me introduce them very briefly. Actually, it's very difficult to introduce them briefly because they have done so much and so many things. But from my screen, on top of my screen, at least as I see it, Eka is there. Eka Cheshashvili is the president of Georgian Institute for Strategic Studies. She was almost every position in Georgia, despite her very young age. She previously served in governmental positions, including Vice Prime Minister, State Minister of Georgia for Reintegration, Secretary of National Security Council of Georgia, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prosecutor General, and Minister of Justice. And then she had several other positions, international positions and connections. But she also has, I don't know how she managed all this, but apart from governmental positions, she also has an academic background. As an associate professor, she taught public international law and accountability for human rights atrocities at various Georgian universities. She has MA in international law from Notre Dame Law School and certificate in human rights law from Oxford University and diploma in law from Tbilisi State University. It's very nice to see you, Eka, tonight. Then I have Richard Giragosyan. He's a founding director of Regional Studies Center at Yerevan. He is also a go-to person in Yerevan about everything Armenia, Caucasus, South Caucasus, and international relations, at least for me. He has been contributing analyst for Al Jazeera and Oxford Analytica. Also, he has serving as a visiting professor at the College of Europe, not only in campus, and senior expert at Yerevan State University. He has a long list of consultancies from Asian Development Bank to CIA, if I'm not mistaken. No, U.S. Department of Defense and U.S. Department of State, among others, but various economic organizations as well. He was, interestingly, also a regular columnist in Turkey for 2 years, 2008, 2010, for the Turkish language international edition of Newsweek. And he is another stranger in Turkey, having been on Turkish TV several times talking about Caucasus, Armenia, Turkish-Armenian relations, etc. And he was quite active in political life when he was based in United States, participating in different election campaigns. I have to say, not Trump administration election campaign, definitely not. Finally, Zaur Shiriev is an independent Azerbaijani analyst, and also currently, of course, he's an analyst for South Caucasus in International Crisis Group based in Baku. He works on security and foreign policy issues, including conflicts in the South Caucasus, of course, particularly Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and Azerbaijan's relations with regional actors, including Turkey, Iran, and Russia. Zaur has a long experience in think tanks and academia, having joined the crisis group in February 2018, but he was before academy associate with the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House from 2015 onwards. He also participated several second track meetings, initiatives on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict since 2008. He was at one time senior research fellow at Ada University in Baku, and also worked at the Center for Strategic Studies in Baku as well. And also he's a regular contributor to several international publications, dailies, newspapers, etc. So we have really a great team tonight, and to look into the issues, what's happening. My wish tonight, and I actually communicated to all the speakers of tonight's webinar, that I don't want to get stuck in the recent flare-up or the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We know what happened. All of us have watched it very closely, and we are still discussing about the results and where we can go from here. And for me, much more important is what is going to happen now, and especially not only between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also for the region. What we should be hoping for the future of the region. What can be, what steps we should be taking to move forward, including Turkey, of course. We are doing this webinar from Turkey. At least I am from Turkey, based in Istanbul. But we have people now from Baku, Yerevan, Kiev, and Istanbul also. So we decided to start with Richard, then Zaur will follow, and finally Ekka will be the last speaker. What we are going to do is all of our speakers will start talking about up to 10 minutes, as less as possible, to make it more active, more lively. Then I'll ask them further questions, and also I will ask them your questions, the attendees. You can ask questions in different places. If you are on Zoom participant here, there are two ways that you can ask. One is, if you look at bottom of your screens, there is a Q&A section. You can ask your questions there, or there is a chat section. You can access and ask your question there. I will ask all of your questions. I'll try to ask them to the participants. Also, those who are following us on Facebook, you can ask your questions there, write your questions there. I will try to monitor those questions as well and try to ask them as well. So without much any further ado, let's start with Richard. Okay, Richard, what are you seeing in the Caucasus? What lessons you have learned in last 20 years, and then how we can go forward from here?
Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. And to begin, I think what is most instructive is the fact or the admission as an analyst that none of my previous analysis has any relevance to the new reality. We have, in many ways, a reality where the old rules no longer apply. We have a new map, both literally and figuratively, and a significant change to the balance of power within the region of the South Caucasus. And specifically, there are three consistent elements defining and even defending the idea of a new balance of power. First is, in many ways, an unprecedented Turkish assertion of power in support of Azerbaijan. In and of itself, no surprise. What is surprising is the direct unprecedented role for Turkey in the near abroad, in the South Caucasus, which in general is regarded as Russia's backyard. And Turkey has succeeded in regaining a lost role as the primary military patron for Azerbaijan, displacing Russia, which previously was the #1 arms provider to Azerbaijan. In addition to this unprecedented Turkish assertion, which also follows a more assertive Turkish approach in Syria, Libya, and the Eastern Mediterranean, we see a second trend, an uncharacteristically passive Russia. Russia's response to 45 days of war was unusually passive and pensive, but it culminated in an outright victory by Russia, giving Russia the one element in the region it lacked before: military peacekeepers deployed in Nagorno-Karabakh and a military presence within Azerbaijan. This as well demonstrates a new balance of power. And the third element in this balance of power is the shifting dynamic geopolitically in terms of the positive, the restoration and reintegration of trade and transport. There is, for example, much less justification for the Turkish government's closure and sealing of the border with Armenia, and with the access through southern Armenia between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan, a new map in terms of trade and transport. And what's important is much of the coming challenge will be the diplomatic implementation of this Russian-imposed agreement, meaning that although the war is over, the conflict is going to be significant diplomatically, and we are now returning to diplomacy. Now, I'll keep my introduction very brief. We are going in alphabetical order from Armenia to Azerbaijan to Georgia, but let me turn it back to you, Mustafa, for specific questions.
Sorry, I muted myself and forgot it. It happens. Sorry. Let me get back to you after I get introductory remarks from everybody, and I'll ask my questions also. Let's say, Zaur, how do you see the situation from Azerbaijan?
Hi, hi to all, and it's nice to join this discussion. And I'm speaking here. I'm going to reflect the opinions in Baku and Azerbaijan. So it's not a, let's say, crash group position, an institutional position. I just wanted to remark this. So first of all, this is a for Baku, for Azerbaijan, this is a military victory. The military victory came after 26 years. So what's basically we see right now, the implemented agreement, at least this is the half implemented agreement. We see that this is the already a peace deal proposals that proposed to the sides in the last let's say at least 25 years since the 1994. So the exactly the all peace proposals have elements of the return to 7 territories back to Azerbaijani jurisdiction and interim status to Nagorno-Karabakh and the security arrangements. So and why and similar breakup happened in 2016 with short-lived 4 days war, and actually the aim of this that war also was to turn military phase to leave military phase and to turn to the political resolution of the conflict. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So in 2016, they were the peace proposal, at least people called it the Lavrov plan or Russian plan. So based on the Madrid principles, what was the it was very similar that a return to 5 territories and then 2 and then interim status and security arrangements. So, but what is different is right now is that first of all, military victory. So military victory is essential for society. I mean, because society felt humiliated in the last 26 years, especially after the military loss in the first Karabakh war. And second thing is that uh, the important is that not only the 7 territories Azerbaijan regained back, 4 with the military force and other 3 with the diplomacy, and also Azerbaijan changed the geographical map of the former Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous oblast, and especially with taking back the symbolic city of Shusha and also some other areas of the Nagorno-Karabakh or the former Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous oblast. So what's the and we have also Russian peacekeepers right now in the region. So many people actually are focusing on more to Russian peacekeepers, Russian return, but also the missing the main the points in this the conflict resolution process. First of all, a Russian proposal was it is not a new. It was on the table for many years, but also this is also might be a lesson for the OIC Minsk Group co-chairs who actually ignored the discussion of the peacekeeping forces. The last time they discussed the peacekeeping forces in the 90s with the high level planet group proposals, and that peacekeeping proposals was based on the realities of the 90s. So that's why if you are going to how to say blame anyone in the region, I think we should also share the responsibility, and that the mediators also should share the responsibility why we have the Russian peacekeepers, not the multinational peacekeepers that envisioned by the Budapest Summit decision in 1994. So how Azerbaijan sees this, let me say that this is the longer period, the time for Azerbaijan, so at least the 5+5. So and there are 2 groups of people. Some see it as an immediate danger to Azerbaijan sovereignty. The second group of people sees that this is a price we pay. And as well, especially for the first group of people, this is that why we stopped this the war, why we didn't continue this, and to make a total victory. I think the reason is simple. There's 2 reasons, as far as I understood. Is the first of all, if Azerbaijan continue the war, and it will cost more human catastrophe in the region, especially coming which the force was near to the main city of the Nagorno-Karabakh, and also the other areas around the Nagorno-Karabakh. So second issue is that Russian intervention, and it was expected. I think Azerbaijan successfully delayed Russian interventions on the 10th of October, then 20th of October, and then finally it came. So, and from beginning, I think Azerbaijan proposal was that Azerbaijan wanted the implementation of the Madrid principles, which is going to implement it. So that's why I think Azerbaijan doesn't have another argument against the foreign the Russia that so to ask a different kind of the deal for now, despite the military victory. So in the future, so right now, the most important question is that what will be the post-conflict identity of Azerbaijanis and Armenians? So this is the key question. Then we will, I think, this will define the future of the conflict resolution in the region. So if if it's going to be a reversible forgiveness, I mean, like that, I can forgive you, someone who wrongs me, only if I can punish him to a similar degree to my own pain. So if the Armenians is going to see this as a let's say the defeat, and so to preparing a new war, then it will be a reversible forgiveness. And the second one is that negotiated forgiveness. That's a primary conditional and dependent on the proportional reciprocal actions. So I see, and I hope that it will be negotiated forgiveness for both sides in the future, because the war, at the end of the war, we will see we might use it in the long term as a good opportunity for development of the region. First of all, first thing is that transportation links and opening of the communication channels will be might be a revolutionary change in the region, especially from economic point of view. The second is the reconstruction, and approximately reconstruction of this seven territories and also the some areas in Nagorno-Karabakh will cost minimum 20 billion US dollars, the maximum 45 billion US dollars. So, and then I think this will cost more, and I think Azerbaijan needs and international donors the support of the redevelopment of the region. And also this development should include also not only the regions that right now they will be full jurisdiction on Azerbaijan, will be fully under Azerbaijan jurisdiction, also the what's left under the Russian peacekeepers on the Nagorno-Karabakh area. So then opening of the border, ending of the blockade of the let's say Turkish blockade, because Turkey closed its border in 1993 with April when the Kelbazar occupied and the United Nations Security Council resolution. So, and Kelbazar will return back to Azerbaijan jurisdiction on the 25th of November. So then I think it was a main argument of the why Turkey kept closing the border. So, and there will be connection between Azerbaijan proper and the Naxchivan Autonomous Oblast, which will open an opportunity to building a railway from Baku to Turkey and onwards, and to interconnecting this railway connection and with the region. So if we look this prospect as a Marshall Plan, so then I think we will see in the longer term the resolution of the conflict. But if we see this as a versal for one or another side, then I think then it will force the sides to prepare a new war. So what will be also implication very shortly about Azerbaijan defense industry, Azerbaijan military? I think it's going to be a revolution in Azerbaijan military procurement policy, especially after the success of the Israeli and the Turkish newly technology developed military weapons. I think Azerbaijan might be also going to cut its defense budget and to make a much more professionalize its army with and with the modern technology. And second, I think economic implication will be big. So and the resource needed, and so also the key issue will be return of the IDPs and refugees. So right now the number is close to the 1 million, even sometimes more. So and it will take a longer term period. And also the Azerbaijan population, I think, will see one they will be surprised negatively that when they see these regions how it was destroyed. This is a result of the first war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I was in the region few days ago. I'm in Fizuli, and it will take the years. It's not easier. It will take the 5-10 years to develop this region. So, and probably we will not envision to expect that in soon Azerbaijan IDPs will return back. Also, even for the mining projects, it was announced by government that it will take 10-15 years to demine all areas. So this is a longer term, how to say, the issue for regional development and the return of the IDPs, and also there will be some immediate challenge. Also, the humanitarian aid to population people in Nagorno-Karabakh. So then return of the Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians back. and also there will be there will be a time there is need how to time reconciliation between the sides, because right now geographical position of this where they are going to live, they will need some communication. So, and the last point is that there will be two questions, immediate short-term question after 1st December. The first question will be what will be status of the Nagorno-Karabakh de facto authorities. So, and because I think this is right now, they are unacceptable for Baku to start in dialogue. The second issue will be the status of the Turkish peacekeepers, and also whether, as it is written in the agreement that the all Armenian troops will withdraw from Nagorno-Karabakh, whether it includes also the self-defense forces of the de facto, the former Nagorno-Karabakh. So, and also the third issue is that whether it's going to be how they're going to manage this, using this supply routes. For example, Azerbaijan will get back to Kalbazar, but there is no proper communication between Azerbaijan proper and Kalbazar. So how they're going to connect. So the same, there are many similar communication issues in this new map of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone.
Thank you, Zahar, very much. Eka, if you allow me, let me ask a question to Richard, because I was wondering about this, and I think it would be nice because Zahar already indicated this. Could you, Richard, tell us a little bit about the domestic psychology and political situation in Armenia now? Okay, it might not be easy, definitely, and will be, the feelings would be high, but I also know you that you can observe situations, taking a step back. Maybe you can convey to us who are not been in Armenia in recent days, months, what's happening there, locally, domestically.
Well, the short answer is I'm greatly worried and concerned in two ways. One is, in a general sense, the democracy, the gains and reforms since a rare, nonviolent people power revolution in 2018 ushered in a new period of legitimacy with free and fair elections. These gains in democracy are now under threat, are imperiled by the unexpected scale of the military defeat. And the weakness of the government seems to be increasing day by day. There is now a cabinet reshuffle that seems to be too little too late to appease opponents to the current government. Now, the real threat, however, is not from the opposition, which is largely unpopular and tied to the former government. The real threat to the prime minister is the prime minister himself. His own words, his own actions are key to his political survival. And what we see is the end of Armenia's myth of invincibility and very surprising disappointment and even incompetence in the performance in the war. What this also means is the recognition that the Nagorno-Karabakh issue predates Armenian independence. It came before. It was first in the Gorbachev period, meaning that politics in modern Armenia have never been without this issue. And therefore, an unprepared society, unprepared by the government for the scale and severity of the military losses and territorial losses, is a significant challenge. My advice, what I'm advising, is an early election to seek a fresh mandate to resolve the political crisis. But the prime minister seems to be very stubborn and impulsive and resisting, even failing to recognize the seriousness of the threat. So I do think that the domestic repercussions from the recent war are continuing and in many ways escalating.
Okay, great. Okay, let me turn to Eka. Of course, Georgia, having involved in a number of conflicts and wars in the region, and having also had issue with Russia and Russian peacekeepers. I'm sure Georgians are watching the situation very closely. So let me have your introductory remarks, then we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. I'll try to provide the perspective from Georgia and then build on some of the propositions and then introductory remarks as well that Richard and Zhao provided. It was very interesting and fascinating in a way to listen to both of them. For Georgia, obviously, everything that was happening now for the past few weeks, and then not only with relation to the conflict and then escalation of the conflict into the war, has been a subject of very acute interest. If you listen now to any professional discourse of consideration among professionals in the field in Tbilisi, through online webinars and then discussions as we are forced to have now during the COVID times, this is the main theme. This is the main theme for experts in international law, main theme for experts in international law as well, because what happened recently in the conflict raises interesting questions from the point of view of international law as well, when it comes to use of ad bellum and then use in bello type of the provisions. So we're very, very keen in watching what is taking place. And then some of the feedback that I will be providing to you now and to our listeners stems from that perspective, obviously. How we see as the Georgians being embedded in our problems with Russia and occupation of Russia of our territories, how we see what took place, and then question marks that we might have for the future. We've seen that it is the first example of the occupation of the territories which was led by the use of force, right? So that we see that for decades, more than 2 decades, recognized occupation of the territories as they were, including under the UN Security Council resolutions. And the occupation took place, which opens up the possibility of return of hundreds of thousands internally displaced persons to the places of habitual residence and homeland. And then the reason why it is taking place, it is not the success of diplomacy, and it is not well managed process of the conflict resolution, but successfully managed a military operation, right? So that's one striking, obviously, example that we see that took place, and that obviously could be then the gate opener now for more substantial conflict resolution that needs to follow, because as both of the speakers now, Richard and Zhao, mentioned, it is a truce now, it is the ceasefire, but we don't see yet the comprehensive peaceful resolution of the conflict per se that has different angles into it. But this is the beginning of it, hopefully of the successful really conflict resolution. But if we would look into this from the eyes of the close to 500,000 Azerbaijani citizens that now have for the first time an actual opportunity of going home, this is the big development in the region that has never taken place in any of the conflict situations in and around, so to say, that we have faced. So this is something that, you know, in Georgia, people pay attention to, obviously. But now going back to the whole process, how it all took place beyond the military way of the occupation in that regard, what we've seen is it was a bit of a culminating moment of the erosion of presence as active actors of anybody from the West in anything that has led to even the ceasefire. Minsk process has always had that ambience, so to say, even more that long, peaceful peace resolution processes that we've had in Georgia, both for Abkhazian region and South Ossetian regions, that Russia was playing a role of the first player among, so to say, equals, but never being an equal in the negotiating process. It always had an upper hand, right, in the process. But at least there was some pretense of the co-chairs as well, being US and being France, one of the powerful players from the side of the EU, to be co-chairs. So the optics were maintained, some of the ideas were generated. We have seen that nothing much came out from 2009 from Madrid Principles times in anything conceptually in terms of the conflict resolution, and neither in practice, neither in theory. And then what we've seen now was a complete retreat of any Western powers, institutions that be, or individual players from anything in the process. There was not even a pretense from any of them of playing any role in it. I would say the transition of the administrations and whole the election, if I may call it wipe, it was more than wipe in the US, played a role in it. US had very little capital perhaps at the time or capacity for maneuver. And Trump's administration has never been known to have too much interest perhaps in this conflict to begin with. So it was not a striking shock, fortunately, to say that it had played no role in it, but it was as close to zero, basically, with this failed attempt of Pompeo convening sort of both parties and then being disregarded basically in anything that parties talked in it. So what we see as a result now is that Russia maintaining that role at the highest level now, that it's a deal breaker, but deal breaker in a different way, where Russia is unapologetically showcasing that it has no allies in the region. And I think it's a very unfortunate message to Armenia in that regard. It's not even a pretense that anybody is allied to Russia. Russia has no allies in the region. It portrays itself as a power that has to be reckoned with. And even with a country like Armenia, which has a special sort of allying strategic relationship with Russia, including within the CSTO, Russia basically said that I don't care what those frameworks are. I can be very formalistic as in interpreting the obligations under the CSTO, for example. I do as it fits my interest whenever it fits in the way that it fits. I don't have any allies, you're too little for that. So that I guess that is a projection of power in that regard. And then in that regard, again, it might not be something that our friends in Armenia might like, but coming in of another regional power as a Turkey into the equation is a good news in that sense, because when we see that from the side of Georgia, at least it has a chance of rebalancing, at least in a regional setting, something where otherwise Russia would have been an unequivocal power, so to say, consolidating the view that it's a Russia's backyard, full stop, when it comes to Caucasus in that regard. And after 2008, and then after 2018 in Ukraine, we have already seen what is happening in the Black Sea region. It's an extreme militarization of the Black Sea region from the side of Russia. And what is happening in Crimea, after occupation of Crimea from Russia, it might have a disastrous effect, obviously, when it comes to the capabilities that Russia is putting in that part of the Black Sea region, which I believe Turkey needs to be reckoning more and taking it more seriously than it does so far, perhaps, when it comes to the consequences of that. One little but important detail, I would say, into what Zaur has mentioned, and Richard alluded to that as well. If you look from the point of geography, it's what has been discussed previously with the occupied regions and the occupation and the way it happens, Lavrov Plan, Madrid principles prior to that. But when it comes to the security presence, it's the first time when it's purely Russian. Yes, with monitoring center, we still don't know when and how sort of Turkey will come into equation. But even with Russian presence, please pay attention to the fact that there are FSB forces as well for the first time for the border, so to say, control and the Lachin corridor. And we have very unfortunate experience in Georgia of FSB forces being put as the security guard, so to say, of occupation lines, and then attempted a creeping annexation as well of the territories that they do in the South Ossetian region, for that matter. FSB forces are even bigger of a menace rather than MOD forces in that regard with the heavy ammunition. And Russia will have both now in the territory in terms of a presence. I'm taking, I guess, too much time into that for my introductory remarks, but then finally, what I would wish, so to say, now to happen is that perhaps when the new administration comes into the US and when the EU consolidates more effort into it, to turn this momentum into something that is more comprehensive, where the solo role of Russia is negated in that regard, and indeed, within the context of rebuilding and reconstruction of the territories where people will be coming back, and with the search of more comprehensive resolution of the conflict per se, it turns into that spin of having more of the presence of international partners, which are much more skilled in terms of negotiating, I would say, all of these nuances related to reconciliation, peace building, reconstruction, have it multifaceted in that way rather than, zero-sum games of the kind that Russia is very skilled to play with, and not to allow, once again, for that momentum to become a management process. Because my final word would be that I hope it is a wake-up call for everybody that preferred mode of operandi, even for the Western communities, of managing rather than resolving conflicts, we are paying heavy results of that. Everybody was comfortable with management of the conflicts, primarily even Russia, because management of the conflict allows it to leverage conflict against its neighbors by weakening them, undermining their democratic development, their statehood development, their aspirations when it comes to Georgia, to EU and NATO, for example. That card needs to be destroyed as a card. We have to have thoughts on how to resolve the conflict rather than how to manage the conflict. Management of the conflict, it's not enough, has never been, but hopefully it becomes a bit of a wake-up call for any potential democratic resolutions anywhere for the conflict.
Great. Thank you very much, Eka. I will come back to the question of how we can move from now for the future, and how can we start reconciliation and the real solution instead of ceasefire. I'll come back to this question, but let me ask Zaur first about the domestic situation in Azerbaijan. I can imagine, but that one of the questions also deals with this. How do you see a political involvement of Azerbaijan domestically in the mid to long term? And with is this, so to speak, victory guaranteed the limitless running of Aliyev in power, or there will be changing in domestic politics in Azerbaijan?
Thank you, Mustafa. Speaking frankly, I think yes, undoubtedly, the President Aliyev will have a different legacy. So he's the first leader since Azerbaijan independence who regained back the territories, and might be historically, it is a big achievement for him. So that's why he will get the much more the support for this the military victory. But the question also is how President Aliyev is going to in the short term, let's say short and mid term, how he's going to manage this Russian peacekeepers, or how he is going to open up the questions, how he's going to challenge the short term issues that will come after the 1st December, after handover of the Kalbazar and the Latsin regions back to Azerbaijani jurisdiction. So there will be many questions will come up, and as I pointed out before, the first question is about this interim status, and so then the status of the Turkish peacekeepers and how it's going to balance the Russia. So because the Russian peacekeepers is very sensitive issue for anyone in Azerbaijan, and unfortunately, ironically, both Azerbaijanis and Armenians never wanted the Russian peacekeepers, and so right now we are facing Russian peacekeepers, and also, but pragmatically, this is the only way that when and how the Russian peacekeepers could get out is that only cooperation between Azerbaijan and Armenians. So this is the only way that when they are going to solve this problem, and also President Aliyev will have, specifically for this conflict, as a very good starting negotiated position. So especially when it comes to the fate of the territories that under the Russian control right now, because for Baku, right, geographically, economically, there is no prospect. So without the support of this, without regional development and integration with Azerbaijan and Turkey. So that's why this will be a triumph card for President Aliyev and Azerbaijani government for next in the short and long term. So, and the most important thing is that what will be the Karabakh issue was an excuse for many things in Azerbaijan. So many things that not especially when it comes to the development of the rule of law, the court system, and many things that when these issues raised always come up is that we have a big Karabakh problem. And right now, half, or let's say fully, this is resolved, at least from Baku's point of view. So that's right now there should be a new thinking for Azerbaijan, redevelopment of its regions, its and also the engagement with in different way problems of the IDPs who is going to return back. So this is a short and mid-term challenge, and main factor also will be about economic issues. So how Azerbaijan is going to get the international the support on this issue, the redevelopment of these regions and return of IDPs. And right now, what we see from agreements, the only UN agencies is involved to the agreement, but there is no, how to say, there is no an issue of the donor conference. What we need is a donor conference, which we could see support of the international organizations and countries, which will help not only this the adjacent territories and also the Nagorno-Karabakh itself. So I think I mean, it's hard to say that what will happen this the governmental relations, but I think everyone understood, even the government also, that this is a new period for a country. This is a new period for nation, and so it's not going to easy, and it's not going to be the same for them that how is going to manage the things inside the country, domestically and internationally. So that's why it's a challenge. Also, it's a big chance. So it depends how the Azerbaijan is going to redevelop its strategy towards the region and also towards the country's development.
Thank you, Richard. Our friend Mithat Çelikbala has asked a question, actually a similar question that one that I asked you, but he seems to also add to domestic politics. He's asking, do you expect any quick change in foreign policy making? And let me also add this, how is the feeling in Armenia now about the Russian position, about the Russian forces in Armenia and their widespread control of different sectors of economy?
Let me begin with the second question, Mustafas, as our host. In terms of the Armenian perception in general of Russia, what's interesting is how much has changed. Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Nagorno-Karabakh for a long time were in agreement on only one issue. They used to be all against Russian peacekeepers. The Armenian government quickly reversed in that position. The general perception in Armenia is, even despite resentment about Russia's passive response, it is Turkey's role in this war that has led the majority of Armenians to welcome the Russian embrace and to welcome the Russian peacekeepers. This is a strategic U-turn in many ways, especially for the more democratic government of Armenia. What we also see is fresh concern that the security and future of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh are dependent on less than 2,000 Russian peacekeepers. That's a concern. But to turn to Mithat's questions, the impact on Armenian foreign policy is very interesting. First, if we look at Armenia, today we have the firing, the dismissal of the defense minister. A couple of days ago, the resignation or firing of the foreign minister. What this means is the imperative for Armenia now, tomorrow, in foreign policy is the need for a new diplomatic strategy. What's going to be Armenia's goal, objectives, and end state for Nagorno-Karabakh? It can't be independence, but what is it exactly? And what's interesting is the Azerbaijani foreign minister is also a recent appointment with no diplomatic experience. He's the former minister of education. The new Armenian foreign minister has diplomatic experience, but no negotiating experience. So it couldn't be, in many ways, more challenging as we face a pivotal test of diplomacy to have rather inexperienced new foreign ministers. The second, I would say, direct impact on Armenian foreign policy, we should expect an acceleration of Armenia's turn investing in a coalition against Turkey with Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, and perhaps Israel. This will be a very assertive coalition with France as well, perhaps directed against Turkey. And third, the final factor is in foreign policy, we do see signs already of a cycle of conflict, a hunger for revenge. And in many ways, this hunger for revenge within Armenia is not just external, but internal. People are looking for someone to blame, and this is both destructive and deadly. And finally, Eka raised a very good point that needs to be repeated and reiterated. The real danger here is the tendency to see this war and the resulting results as the confirmation, as a reward for aggression, where military force of arms seems to have forced a resolution to a conflict over diplomacy. This is a dangerous precedent, hence the need for diplomacy going forward. And in this new calculation, it's the European Union who plays a key pivotal role with the UN in the challenge of post-conflict stability. Because Howard has identified several key points where the real challenge is not just today, but tomorrow, and whether this can be a lasting, durable, new path or period of peace. And at this point, it doesn't seem likely unless we actually invest more in post-conflict security and stability. I do think overall, everyone has to compromise, even the winner, even Azerbaijan. Everyone has to lose in order to win.
Can I add just one element, Mustafa, if I may?
Sure.
When it comes to the momentum right now in terms of what could happen after, and then I'm not in the position, obviously, to add substantially more what Zaur already mentioned vis-a-vis Azerbaijan, but then I just think that it is a momentum that needs to be seized really as a historical momentum for reinvigorating the national agenda, which could be much more ambitious when it comes to what it can be in terms of international policies that be, or economic development as well, because the opportunities are there, and not only challenges when it comes to how much resources are needed for rebuilding of these regions. Because if you look at it, that provides a greater purpose when it comes to consolidation of efforts, international support, and at the same time, creation of jobs and economic development. And if it's done creatively when it comes to different economic approaches, different economic zones that could be created in those areas, which could be on the verge of the transport corridors. I mean, this is an untapped opportunity that could have multifaceted benefits that could come out of it. And it's not even an issue of just political standing in the country, but of greater opportunity of reinvigoration of a bigger purpose and the national identity build-up. And when it comes to Armenia per se, it's a deeper dive, obviously, as well, to see how one reflects on this very painful moment and then sees of what this new agenda will be for the future. Because if I may say so, most of the policies were too much history oriented for many years now. And then that has led to the extreme rigidity in the negotiating processes from the Armenian side, without using any opportunities that either Madrid principles or other elements of negotiating processes offered. And when it comes to what happened now, while I'm not a proponent generally of the use of force in that regard, but I think what happened now showcases that use of force is not off the table. So if diplomacy fails and becomes just a management of the conflict, with an understanding that it will just continue endlessly like that, it is not the reality anymore, and it can change. And while having that perception, there needs to be more vigorous approach than obviously in the diplomatic processes, so that there is an understanding that it leads to something rather than becomes an end in itself. Unfortunately, most of the negotiating processes has become that. And what I see vis-a-vis my own country in Georgia right now, all of the negotiating processes that we have, it's a continuation of ongoing processes with no results into it, with continued creeping annexation of more and more territories from the Russian side of the territories outside even of the occupation lines. And then what we hear mostly is just the signs of regret for those who support Georgia's territorial integrity and nothing else. And people who are living on the ground in those territories, they are losing their homes every day when the scripting annexation lines move forward. And that was the reality for many people, hundreds of thousands, of not being able to go to their homes. So for them, now, in the perception of those who are now able to go home, use of force is validated. And I can understand why, from a human sort of look into that. But the wake-up call for all of us should be that if there is no meaningful change into how negotiating processes are taking place, these will become the new reality, somewhat of a new normal, especially when, if and again, more global security arrangements will not reemerge, hopefully with more of the US back into the scene, with more of the foreign policy discourse into it, because other than that, it's different regional powers having then different regional arrangements that could come out of it. And then some will benefit from that, some will not, but at the end of the day will not lead eventually on a global scene to more stability. But as of now, when it comes to the results of the outcome, occupation of those territories have been recognized by all international documents. And what happened now is the occupation of the territories that have been recognized as the occupied. So in a way, it's a question even for international lawyers to ask, how do use of force related principles apply to the situations when something like that happens, right? Because these are the open questions now.
Yes, we come to now the place that we should be talking about the solution and who's going to start actually this peace and reconciliation and moving forward. One of the actors is, of course, is EU. Eka, let me ask you, there is a question also here, Theodor Moga from Romania. He's asking, how would you explain the limited role played by the EU in this crisis? Is the EU so consumed by its internal challenges, which keeps it so busy that it cannot really look into this, or was this a deliberate choice by the EU not get involved, to be involved in this crisis, looking maybe from a pragmatic perspective, seeing that it could have not done anything? And of course, let me add something here, whether EU could become one of the actors who could reinitiate peace process in the region, maybe balancing the other actors.
I think EU had different issues as the problems why it happened, not as a deliberate policy, I believe so, from the side of the EU, that it didn't matter or they are okay with the outcome as it is when it comes to Russia's role in the way that Russia played in the negotiating process, or for Turkey for that matter. It's the overall scale of the crisis in which all of us are engaged right now, and then EU as well, when it comes to internal issues and when it comes to this rift in transatlantic relations as well. There are many burning issues that EU had to deal with, and I believe that there was no sufficient political capacity or institutional capacity at the time to play an active role in it. And part of the problem was the overall issue vis-a-vis Turkey within the EU as well, which was not related to Karabakh, but was related to the Mediterranean part of the problem, and Greece and Cyprus, and then the escalation of confrontation within the EU member states as well, as to what the approach of the EU vis-a-vis Turkey should have been based on that. So there are camps now within the EU when it comes to the approach vis-a-vis Turkey. And by that, the mere fact that Turkey played an active role now in this process had its own waves and resonance, so to say, in the way how EU could have reacted. But big portion of why EU was not perhaps forced into it more was because US was completely absent as well. So if there would have been a strong US presence, transatlantic alliance would have played much better. And finally, as a resolution of what could come out, I believe that for any effectiveness for the EU to have in this regard, US presence again would be needed, because heavy lifting needs to be done at this point. And then until the new administration is at place in the situation of a lame duck administration, will be very hard to expect for Russia to pay any attention, for that matter, or by Turkey as well, to what any of the current players as the co-chairs would have to say. I believe that the Minsk format needs to be changed. It's outdated, and especially from the EU side, France lost the credibility, let's put it bluntly. I mean, lately it became openly biased in many ways in terms of the positioning, and it's not only vis-a-vis Armenia and Azerbaijan and then Armenian diaspora in France as a factor, but vis-a-vis Turkey as well, which is an extremely high-level confrontational issue right now between France and Turkey. It's not the good times, let's put it that way, between the two countries. So in that regard, there needs to be a thorough thinking from the side of the EU, whether it's EU itself that needs to be part of the process, as it was the case, for example, with the vis-a-vis Georgian conflicts, for example, or if it's any member state, who is best placed as a country with authority that could be reckoned with, or unbiasedness as well that could come with it, so that it could be acceptable partner in that regard, generating the traction as the main partner for both sides, because it will be very important that both sides will have to listen to the representatives here. To US, ultimately, everybody will listen anyway, right? If the US comes with any force into it. But who would be the trusted actor from the side of the EU remains to be seen. So I would see that the most challenging time is before new administration comes in, and that will be hopefully normal ways it should be expected in January. And other than that, it's implementation of the ceasefire as it will be following up until the December, settling in, and then New Year's time perhaps in a peaceful way. And then after that, opening up some strategic brainstorming behind the scenes, back channeling of negotiations of what is the format in which any solution of this conflict needs to be, and reconstruction of these regions, reconciliation, and all of it in economic front as well, need to be discussed with, so that it's internationalized, inevitably so, and done in such a way that it actually has the real cloud of other actors, rather than, you know, a solo role of Russia playing in, only Turkey being an active member outside of, in addition to Russia in this field. So US, an inevitable component of the process in my understanding, and change of the format. France cannot be anymore, in my understanding, a co-chair in this process and being a valid sort of acceptable counterpart that one has to be in the negotiating processes.
Thank you. Similar question to Zaur. I mean, what do you expect? Who's going to take the initiative for the peace process, assuming that this ceasefire keeps continuing as planned? Do you think that it will be a Russia-Turkey duo instead of Minsk group? Or if it's going to be Minsk group, maybe you can also weigh in on the position of France, which is quite much discussed in Turkey as well. And final question here, a related one, is actually from Italy. Marco Alvi is asking, in a scenario of gradual rapprochement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, of course, this assumes a peaceful transformation and resolution of the conflict, then may the extent of trilateral cooperation between Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan could extend into Yerevan, Armenia, and counter-influence Russian position in the region. Could this kind of a relationship balance Russia in the region?
Thank you, Mr. Ove. I would like to add a few thoughts about what Eka said, because I agree with her, especially when it comes to the idea that actually the mediators or international actors mostly focus on the preventing war rather than the shaping of peace. So that the main task became after how they are going to prevent the war, and that when the war stop and the task finished. So that's why the resolution to conflict prolonged so long years. And one of the signal was in the July this year, when the border clash happened between Azerbaijan and Armenia. No one paid attention, and for 4 days of the clash between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and only one official from Western countries was the EU special representative who visited the region and who actually wanted to know what's happening. But we didn't see any kind of engagement by the Minsk group co-chairs to the region and touring to the Baku and Yerevan to understand how to shape the peace. So that's why they never seen a frustration inside of Azerbaijan frustration of the population that who actually forced to flee from their homes. So, and it was seen always the secondary or the third issue when it comes to the resolution of the conflict. So it was always ignored. So they never seen that it's so it happened 30 years ago and nothing is going to change. So it's happened 30 years. So what we can do, this was the approach. So that's what that's the failure of the diplomacy. And I agree that Eka, this is going to be a lesson learned by the who is going to engage with different conflict resolution process in a part of the different the countries. So that if you keep the preventing a war, it will end up with a new war. So when it comes to who is going to negotiate, I think that what they are going to negotiate. This is the question, I think, not who is going to negotiate, what they're going to negotiate. So I think for Baku, President Aliyev said that there is no status. So I think when he said that if there is no status discussion, he means that Azerbaijan is not going to offer a status that they was on the table a year ago, that high-level autonomy for Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians, that a semi-independent status. So this is not going to be a starting position for Baku anymore. So for Baku, starting position will be giving some cultural or the rights or other things to Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians, but this is going to be starting position, but not as a final compromise from Baku side. So that's why the question is that what they're going to negotiate first. So and when they are going to negotiate. But immediate challenge right now is that so there are 2,000 Russian peacekeepers, and all Armenian forces is going to withdraw. Who is going to play up the police forces? Role of the police forces, who is going to be administration, the local, as it the short term. So that's why there is need a civilian mission also to the region. Might the UN propose or EU supported civilian mission, because the only civilian missions can help the societies to re-engage with each other. Unfortunately, right now, what's happening is that the new supply routes, new roads that connecting the region that is going to develop in the next 3 years is going to disengage this Azerbaijan and Armenians, not re-engage. So I think they will cross the different areas that they will not meet the Azerbaijan and Armenians. So that's why I think there will be a plan how they are going to re-engage with the population. So that's why, so Baku's starting position is different right now. And so when it comes to the Minsk group, I think Baku is not happy with the role of that played of the Minsk co-chairs, Western Minsk co-chairs, because during the war, they focused to more Turkey rather than a conflict. So they tried to prevent the Turkish, how to say, influence of the region, and also they misunderstood the Turkish role, because the general perception in West was that Turkey is managing everything, Turkey deciding on behalf of Baku. So if we pressure to Turkey, then Baku will cease or Baku will change its position. But it was vice versa. It wasn't the case. That Turkey was a supportive role when it comes to diplomacy. So that Turkish role misunderstood and misperceived based on the Turkish experience with these countries in the different part of the world, or Libya or the Syria. So that's why right now I think if they continue, the Western countries will continue focusing more to Turkey rather than conflict resolution, then it will be there will be less role they can play in the conflict resolution process. So I think so right now there are many discussions, because you know that Minsk group is not only about the co-chairs, there are also the permanent members. The German is a permanent member, the Turkey is a permanent member, there are many countries, Sweden, Finland, so there might be time to enlarge the Minsk group and to bring the all countries together and to come up with the idea, not only that how the Baku and Yerevan is going to negotiate the final status, but also how to develop the region, how to help the refugees and IDPs, not Azerbaijanis, also the Armenian refugees, how to open up, how to re-establish their daily life after this destructive war in all this area. So that's why there might be, when you look at the Minsk group co-chairs, Minsk group permanent members, you can see that it's mostly European Minsk group. So that's why I think there will be a role of the EU could play a more role. And when it comes to the criticism that why EU is not played a role, because EU is not a part of the peace process. Official, the EU and only France is representing as a co-chair. So that's why EU doesn't have any formal role in the peace making process. Might be from now on, it's the time the EU to look to strengthen the mandate of its own already EU special representative, and to find out a way how to engage more, because the EU will be only institution that who can help the region to develop more and to reestablish the contact between Azerbaijan and Armenia with a new peace agenda. I believe this is the only thing that so the EU role is much more, I think, would be constructive.
Okay, Zahar, thank you. Richard, same question to you. Who do you think should start the peace process, reconciliation, and who would be the best actor now to do so? That's the first question. The second is, do you think the presence of Turkish forces in Azerbaijan, now there is going to be some sort of Turkish force there? We don't know the number, we don't know their function, but there will be some. How would Armenia see this and perceive this, and how would this affect the reconciliation process? And finally, also, would you give a chance this kind of economic, because all three of you actually talk about the trade and business possibilities if there is a reconciliation. Would you think that this would accelerate, help the situation for the solution in the region?
Well, let me briefly take from the reverse order of the questions. The reason I'm stressing economics is counterintuitively, in any other conflict, post-conflict situation, business, trade, transport would be the least effective incentives. I argue, however, just the opposite. In this particular case, at this particular time, the economic recovery from COVID-19 is a serious challenge. This is a shared threat from COVID-19. This is why we could have a much more effective economic incentive. And it is a lift all boats positive driver. This is why the real key turning point may be Turkey reopening the closed border with Armenia. In other words, to add even more of a new dynamic. And that economic process and promise is very real because of the COVID-19 recovery. The second question, in terms of looking at the real challenge here going forward, is the EU is probably best suited and the only international actor that can actually take care of the donor conference, the financial economic aspects of stability. In other words, how do we keep a peace? If we have an agreement and we have diplomacy, how do we ensure less risk of renewed hostilities? And I do think there are two international organizations now on the ground, the United Nations and the International Committee for the Red Cross, which never gets enough credit for the work they do behind the scenes. And I do think this opens the door to greater European Union involvement and what we should expect from the incoming Biden administration. As a Democrat, I do think we should expect by the summer a shift in U.S. policy away from disengagement. Ironically, Georgia will become more strategically significant, and I do think there will be a return to the region. In terms of whether it's France, Turkey's a member of the Minsk group, I agree with Zahar. We need to activate the Minsk group as a whole, the Nordic countries as well. And in many ways, the EU has to more formally adopt an institutional approach. Now, having said that, what worries me is at the end of the day, it's Russian peacekeepers. And what I've learned from Eka and my Georgian friends and Ukrainian friends is that there's no such thing as Russian peacekeepers. And once they deploy, they never go home. This may become a shared threat in terms of the interloper of Russia. And it's something that merits more scrutiny. Beyond that, I don't have any answers. I'm still learning. I'm still observing. This is why I'm grateful that it's Howard and Eka with us to teach me.
It just
And
very,
could you
very,
tell,
I'm sure.
Eka, could Eka, in the minute, could you read the question? There is a long question for you from the Zeki,
For me?
Zeki Demir. Yeah, in the Q&A, it's a
Okay, I will.
quite a long question. You read it, and in the meantime, Richard, could you talk a little bit about possible perception of Turkish forces in Azerbaijan?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the question because it's an easy question. It's overwhelmingly negative.
All right.
And in
All right.
one short sentence, perception matters more than reality. And the threat perception is extremely high of any Turkish military presence. And it resurrects fears from the past, from 1915.
I mean, sure. Yeah. Thank you. A kind of a follow-up question. During the conflict, of course, we have heard several times from the Armenian president, kind of exaggerating, maybe overplaying the Turkish role in the conflict, maybe in an attempt to consolidate his power base in the country, or use it in the European sense, garner the European support. But I'm sure this also had some sort of an impact in the Armenian society. And one of the issues that I'm interested in, and I think we talked with you this just before starting this event, is whether we can move from here forward between Turkey and Armenia also, because one of the reasons of the close border was the part of the occupation of Azerbaijani territory. So this has ended one way or another now. Could we move forward? This is a question, of course. How long will it take to overcome this extremely current negative view in Armenia regarding the Turkey in the Caucasus?
Well, the very short answer is there is a unique possibility, because in many ways, if Turkey takes a unilateral move, if Turkey makes the first move, it may contribute to a new environment. What we also see is, for many years, normalization between Armenia and Turkey were hostage to Baku. Now, normalization is hostage to Yerevan. And in this regard, the resurrection, the restoration of the one nation, two states, the perception is threatening from an Armenian perspective. So it will take time. But if the Erdogan government does take a unilateral gesture, restoring direct flights, opening the border, there is perhaps a new perspective that we face.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Eka, you read the question. It's more
Yes,
about Russian peacekeepers and whether could you open up on a little bit their
actually,
possible roles? And
that was what I was about to add as well to what has been mentioned by Richard as well. When it comes to Russian presence on the ground, and yes, there are no Russian peacekeepers per se. There's no notion of that. It's a Russian military presence, and we need to call it as it is, right? And when they come, they rarely leave, if we're very diplomatic about that. There were several occasions, one occasion of that after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, but that's about it when it comes to them leaving when they have a presence like that. But what it means in the practical term as well. Russia does not have an interest in resolution of the conflict, because management of the conflict is within Russian interest. It maintains the presence of Russia, and it puts it in control in terms of leveraging that presence, in terms of influencing the developments in the countries which are affected by that. So if we speak about any turn that either Armenia or Azerbaijan can make in the future, escalation of the conflict can always be something that Russia can tap into if Russia is the only control holder, an eye and ear, so to say, of the presence on the ground. having a monitoring mission, at least, if not the full-fledged peacekeeping forces, which would be ideal to internationalize peacekeeping forces as part of the resolution of the process, there needs to be an independent monitoring mechanism, at least as a bare minimum, so that if anything happens, there is a clear-eyed, fact-based analysis of what actually happened. This CSDP mission in Georgia, EU monitoring mission, even if it has no access to the occupied territories, as much as monitoring mission of OSCE has no access to the occupied territories in Ukraine as well, at least if there is escalation of any kind, there is an independent report of what actually happened. Because what Russia usually does, it can fake actually who did what and use that for acceleration of the conflict or for pressure points that it wants to create. This is very dangerous because now we speak about positive developments that could happen, right? In terms of negotiations, in terms of economic front and everything. All of it will be hostage to that military presence of Russia solely on the ground if that is not checked at least by something, if not internalization of the peacekeeping forces, but at least the monitoring missions that could be part of it as a bare minimum to begin with. So speaking about the role of the EU, that could be a very powerful step for the EU to make a decision. Parties need to agree to that, obviously, for any military, non-military even presence of that kind. But CSTP missions from the EU have their own beauty. Unlike to the OSCE, Russia is not then part of decision-making process of the budget of those missions or the operational side of it. So could be an element to think about. And in Turkey-Armenia relationship, it's a very, very important issue because if we are about to create future where there is a chance of beginning of the new beginnings, so to say, there needs to be rethinking and diversification of what opportunities in the future. So there is an element of a win-win that has a regional perspective rather than zero sums in this case. None of it will be easy for Armenia to make and to do it now after what happened. But if there is a tangible component into it, a right way of negotiating those solutions, linking it to the developments with the conflict resolution, then that creates a very, very important angle into what could be the part of the future in this regard. And finally, I still stick to Georgia one way or the other, but then the way I would see it, that the powerful message for the West, that they are back into the game in the region, would have been more presence in the country where they have more freedom perhaps of doing that when it comes to the local political, not only acceptance, but requirement for that. And then recently, consolidated appeal from all Georgian opposition parties came to before Pompeo visited Georgia. Thinkers, opinion makers did the same, asking for military presence of the US in Georgia. There needs to be some diversification. There needs to be upbringing and uplifting of the military capabilities in the region. And then part of it is the way how Georgia could be seen as a rebalancing act, so to say, so that there is no freeway that Russia might have in terms of the military presence. And if it's done in the right way, then that could be something that could showcase in a tangible way that we're not abandoning the region, and then we are part of the game, and we are part of the game in a meaningful way. So that could be something that could be merited, and that could help developments not only in Georgia, but vis-a-vis Ukraine and vis-a-vis Karabakh conflict as well, and then this reconciliation process between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the future. The voice will be clearly heard then when it comes to diversification of the players on the ground.
Okay, we promised 90 minutes and we are almost up. So I will give the floor one more time to all of you, but also ask I also ask small questions as well. Could you, Zaur, let's start with you. Your final points, and also about Iran. We haven't talked at all about Iran and its role in the Caucasus. And in this conflict, of course, Iran was not involved, but there were some news and information about Azerbaijanis living in Iran and their position and how they are forcing their government to take position, etc. And recently there were a couple of news in Turkey about some Iranian MPs making speeches in the parliament, Iranian parliament, against the land connection between Nahchivan and Azerbaijan. Could you also comment a little bit in your last points about Iran?
Okay, I think yes, Iran was a status quo player for the region, and the development was very unexpected for Iran. So because especially in the southern part of the region, that the four regions that Fizulija, Gubadla, and Zangilan, which is originally state border with Iran, was under the occupation and also under control of Armenians. So right now the things has changed rapidly, which is making which is a new reality for Iran. So Iran is not expected this kind of the reality. So and also this is somehow the harmonization of some close relations with Azerbaijanis living in Iran, and we saw this the joy of the people in Iranian side, that how they were happy that Azerbaijani forces moved to the region. And the most important, I think this is also might be, so first of all it's also the resources. So there's the water reservoir and other things that it was used one-sided by Iran until that time, despite there were agreements, 2016 agreement. So Azerbaijan agreement came very late. I mean that until 2016 they never reached this point. But right now Azerbaijan is going to owner of the natural resources in this region. And is going to use these natural resources. So right now Azerbaijan is getting what is rightful for it. So that's why it's a new reality, economic reality also. And the third issue is that transport as a transport corridor. So if it's going to implement it, I mean that Azerbaijan connection through Armenian territory to Nakhchivan, and Azerbaijan is not going to use the Iranian territory when it's going to land connection to Nakhchivan. It's a Nakhchivan Autonomous Oblast. So it's going to make the Iranian role less important when it comes to transport corridors. So it's going to be isolated a little bit. So that's why I think that I heard also that the concern from Iranian side, and so Iranian foreign minister is going to visit Baku, and I think the Baku's approach is not making this the land connection isolate Iran. It's Azerbaijan point is that to much more to reconnect more and to might be to use this opportunity to reconnect with Armenia and also to bring the more economic development to the region. So and the purpose is not isolation of Iran. And I think it's very sensitive issue for Baku to keeping a very good relation with Iran. So I know that there are this kind of the concerns coming from Iran. I think this is also going to be one of the negotiation. It's going to be negotiated between Baku and Tehran in coming times. So my final point, I think. I hope we will see this as the end of the hostilities, and that not a revenge. If it's going to revenge, then there will be another war. 20, 25 years or 30 years, might be earlier. So that's why it's not a, and also the second issue is that no one is happy that Russian troops involved as a peacekeepers, not peacekeepers. But I think that the one big difference is that Turkish involvement. Baku sees Turkey as a balancing actor in this regard. So and this is a little bit different that the situation in, or we believe that is different from the situation in Georgia and Ukraine and other the conflict zones. So and one thing is also that as Eka say that there should be international mission, civilian mission to the region, to the Karabakh conflict zone, either verification mission or the humanitarian mission, also, which is going to be very key of not only the prevention of the hostilities, but also might be integration between much more communication. So I think the only communication in the short term between Azerbaijan and Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh will be through the Russians. So why to do a different way? Not why to have this discussion as starting point with the help of the much more international body, not with the Russians also, to diversify the opportunities of negotiation or the connection between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So that's why that's very important. That's all from my side. Thank you for inviting me, and it was very nice to see my friends and their great analysis and the valuable comments.
Thank you, Zahar. Thank you very much. Richard, your last points, and also there is one, I would say, provocative question here from Susanna Shah. And I know I'm quite sure about your answer here about this. The question is this the right time to have a pro-Russian oriented, strong military government in Armenia? Democracy is well and good, but we are badly injured. I think that's the question. But your last points also.
Well, before I get to that provocative question, there are three outcomes from this war that I want to highlight. The first outcome is the new narrative. From an Armenian perspective, the narrative of this war is an infant democracy, Armenia, was at war with two much larger, more powerful authoritarian states. And this is a new narrative to be addressed as well. Second is a new strategic context. And in that consideration, from this day forward, I think it's a clear outcome that Armenia, no matter what, will be ever more firmly within a Russian orbit. The risk is back of overdependence on Russia with little room to maneuver by the government here. The third outcome is the regional context. For example, Armenian-Georgian relations are going to get very bad very quickly. There's a degree of resentment, frustration, and anger at the use of Georgian airspace for Turkish military supplies going into Azerbaijan. This is going to be a serious problem. Just as Armenian relations with Iran are going to decline. Iran is seen as much more pro-Azerbaijani lately and through the war. And final conclusion is going forward, stability depends now on the diplomacy to come. Whether we can turn this ceasefire agreement into a real peace agreement and address the unanswered questions, status, security. And finally, to answer the question, fortunately, Armenia has two advantages: stable civil military relations and increasingly resilient institutional democracy, where our real advantage is not in the hands of one individual Democrat, neither Saakashvili nor Pashinyan. Our advantage is in institutional democracy. In other words, individual Democrats could be helpful, but democratic institutions matter much more. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Richard. Eka, we couldn't talk too much about Georgia, but would there be lessons from this conflict for Georgia about reintegration of Georgian territory, or that's old story now?
Well, with reintegration of Georgian territories per se, it's a different situation vis-a-vis Russia, obviously. And then we always knew what we know now as well, that unfortunately with our own forces, we can never take them back when it comes to the force per se. But when it comes to how table can be reshuffled and then something that is not unexpected could happen even widely, that's a good lesson to learn in that regard, just not to quit thinking creatively of what could be the solution to something that many might think that has no solution to come. And then in that regard, we've never had that pessimism that reintegration of our regions is an impossibility, but that reinforces a hope that not by force, obviously, but by other ways of solving the conflict with the way how the regional setting could be changing over the time. One needs to be creative enough, ready enough, to deliver some change. And by ready enough, it's the homework that we always need to do ourselves by strengthening ourselves. And I'm afraid for the time being, my country is not doing well enough in terms of becoming more resilient and stronger in that regard. So that's obviously part, unfortunately, of the equation. But to end on a positive note, I would say what I see, where we are now, it's the history in the making in so many ways, not only in our region, but then globally as well. We are at times when anything is possible. That has good sides, that has bad sides into it as well. But if we have our own strategic vision of what we want to be made and shaped out of our future at the regional level as well, then we are best fit to lobby for that and then be more proactive for that. Because one thing what I have learned in my own experience as well is that while Russia is very good in imposing negativity and conflicts and then leveraging its own military power in the region that it calls its own neighborhood, Russia is very bad in providing any recipe is what the momentum of hijacking perhaps this positive agenda for the future from Russia by actors who are best fit to do that. European Union, US, ourselves, we are more fit for thinking through it, what this creative future could be for us, and then hijacking that agenda from Russia so that Russia has no monopoly of what the future individually for our countries could be, and then what the future collectively of the region should be in the future. We all bear responsibility for that. Our partners bear responsibility for that, but we need to be creative in thinking, rethinking of what that could be, and really hijacking our future from Russia so that we are not hostages of Russia, but we are shaping ourselves, our future, and then bringing that confidence and enthusiasm to our partners to be engaged in that positive shaping up of our future regionally. And I hope it's not just overly estimated sort of enthusiasm in that regard, but then something that we need to believe in and work for and be committed to. Is because of Russia, but not doing anything to change it as much as we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the participants, attendants. Good questions. There was quite a strong interest. And of course, I also thank my friends here, panelists, Richard, Eka, Zaur. It was nice to see you, even if it's online. I hope we can meet again soon in your region, not in Turkey. I would prefer to come to the region and meet you there. Thank you and good evening to everybody.
Thank you so
we'll
much.
have
Thank you
another
for all
meeting
of you.
soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.